I think this is a really interesting one because a lot of people assume that the resurrection of Jesus is something Christians kind of just believe on quote unquote faith. That it's sort of it's not something you could necessarily know or test or whatever. It's just a kind of it's there in the Bible, and you just have to believe it or not believe it. I don't think it is quite like that, though. I think the way I see it is that this isn't just a sort of, hey, could have happened, maybe it didn't happen. You just have to have faith to believe it. It's a genuinely historical question. First of all, it's a question that is kind of open to investigation in that sense. And a lot of the skeptics and atheists that I've met over the course of my life have never really encountered that idea that actually the Bible itself is not just a kind of moral rule book. That's the way a lot of people think of it, but it's actually a set of historical documents. It's the kind of historical documents that many historians of the ancient world kind of regard as almost unparalleled in terms of what it tells us about the ancient world and the way it puts us in touch with that era. And that's never been more true of any documents than the Gospels and the early letters of Paul and the account of the early church in Acts. These are actually, when you look at them, compared to other historical documents of the same era, they are absolutely head and shoulders above the others in terms of their authenticity, their early provenance, how closely they were written to the events that they describe. There's all kinds of ways in which the number of copies we have of them in existence. There's so many ways in which actually the Bible is more than just a kind of religious text. It's actually a really interesting set of historical documents. And one of the events in those historical documents that some of the authors give the most time to are the events around Jesus' death and resurrection. So we have just a wealth of actual historical evidence here, more sort of detail and evidence for the death and the claim of Jesus' resurrection than we might have for lots of other major historical events that, no one ever kind of questions in the historical world. That the crossing of the Rubicon by Caesar is a major historical event, of the ancient world. No one doubts it. It's there. But we have far better textual evidence for the death of Jesus on the cross than for any of those kinds of events. And so a lot of it kind of sometimes brings up my skeptical friends a bit short when they realize, oh, actually, this isn't just a kind of funny old religious book. It's actually a book that's got this kind of historical aspect to it. And you kind of need to take that seriously. And then I would want to sort of say, okay, well, look, it's a book of history, but, maybe they were just making it up. Maybe, these were just exaggerated tales, whatever. And then the question to go is, well, let's apply some historical sort of ways of looking at this text and ask, does it make sense? And there are, if you don't mind me kind of just taking a bit of time to lay this out, getting nerdy, getting geeky here.
I love it.
Apologies, Steph. There are maybe 4 or 5 key things that I'd want to point out to someone who's maybe skeptical about whether any of this stuff really happened, as reported in the Gospels. And I'd want to say this. There are 5 particular data points that the majority of historians agree on, whether they're believing Christians or skeptics, agnostics. These are kind of the consensus among historians of this era about these stories as we find them in these historical documents in the Gospels and Paul's letters and so on. And here they are. Firstly, that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion. Like I said, you could hardly find a fact of ancient history that is better attested than that one. Okay, in all 4 Gospels, in lots of extra biblical accounts and things, it's clear that Jesus Christ of Nazareth died by Roman crucifixion. Okay. The second thing that has the broad consensus of scholars, both Christian and non-Christian, is that his empty tomb was discovered by a group of his female followers. Okay. Now, this is an interesting one because why do a lot of scholars who don't necessarily have Christian beliefs actually believe that this probably did happen, actually? Well, it's partly because one of the unusual things about the ancient world is that in that day and age, the testimony of a woman was worth far less than that of a man, in the ancient world. And so if you were inventing a story about a crucified and resurrected Messiah, the last thing you would do is make the first discoverers of the empty tomb women, because
Right.
that kind of goes against, your interests, basically, if you're trying to persuade people of it and it's not true.